everybody. It's been a little bit of a wait since the last talk. I've been busy building lots of things, and as you know, in the AI space, things move pretty quickly. Because of that, I have been focused on all of the ins and outs of new techniques and haven't really stopped to take a beat and let you all know how to actually build some of these things. A lot of you I might have connected with at various CLE events where I talked to you a little bit about whether you can use AI, if you can, how you might think about using it in your practice, how to sort of get started. But the really cool stuff is the stuff that I can't really talk about during CLEs just because most folks aren't there. So this is my outlet. This is my happy place where I get to show you all the cool things that I've been working on for my firm. And so today we're going to work on something that's, fairly basic if you're more on like the tech side of things. If you're all in on AI, you already know about these things. But if you have been playing around with, say, ChatGPT, or in this case, Claude is what we'll be using, you may or may not have heard about some of these techniques. And so hopefully you'll walk away feeling a little bit more empowered about how to use AI in your practice. Okay, so the techniques we're going to cover today include skills and agents. So a skill is like a set of instructions that you share with your AI based on the content of your conversation. So it's something you can go back and reuse over and over again. There is a somewhat similar thing in ChatGPT. ChatGPT doesn't quite have feature parity with Claude Code, but they do have something called custom GPTs, which is kind of sort of the same. With a custom GPT, you're basically configuring an agent to have a specific prompt every time you run with it, which is kind of sort of what we're doing here, but this is a little bit more robust. So with that, why don't we just start getting into it. So this is not Claude Desktop. This is Claude Code, and it's running in what's called a CLI. So if you've ever opened a terminal in your desktop or on your Mac, then that's where the CLI lives. I'm not going to go into how to install Claude Code on the CLI. Just go ask Claude yourself and it will gladly walk you through it. We're going to talk a little bit past that, but when you're wondering what this interface is, this is my Claude Code interface for this session. So what we're going to build today is a cap table red flag analyzer. So basically what this thing is going to do is at the end of our session, it's going to be an agent that you're able to submit a cap table to and then have it run through and do a variety of checks that you might do in your practice, but do it all automatically and do it a little bit better than if you just drop something straight into ChatGPT or into Claude. So I have some pre-typed prompts in here just to make things go a little bit faster. That's something I'm trying to do. I'm trying to do shorter videos and do them a bit more frequently. So let me get that started. Okay. So right now we're defining a way for the AI to think about a cap table. So basically breaking it out into its component pieces. It's going to be thinking in terms of, okay, who the founders might be, whether there's certain flags that have passed on the tool, or not on the tool, on the cap table. So for example, if there's founder elections, if there's vesting involved, what sort of conversion vehicle is being used, things like that. And we're just basically calling it out for the AI. Now, the reason that we're doing that is because if you've come to one of my talks before, I'll have mentioned how AI is basically an advanced pattern matcher. You're not able to just give it a set of instructions and have it understand what you're trying to do. Instead, it tries to find among all of the data out there in the world what might look like the right answer for your particular question. The more complicated your question is, the less likely there's an exact hit out there in the world on which your AI can base its answer. And beyond that, even if there is a perfect answer out there somewhere, the chances are that it's being drowned in a flood of other information that doesn't quite hit the mark. So instead of expecting the AI to be able to understand all of those things innately, you have to break it out into baby steps. I like to think about AI instructions and getting better outputs out of it, kind of in line with like a philosophy. So if you're thinking in terms of tech and you're not a techie person, you might find it a little bit intimidating to try and go about things and learn about functions and classes and methods and accessors and mutators and all of the things that you might hear about in programming. So instead, think about it in terms of philosophy. And that's probably a bit more native to most of you attorneys out there. Another way you might think about it is like IRAC, right? Like when you're explaining an issue to a judge about a particular fact pattern in case law and its application, you are breaking things out into their individual pieces and then putting them all together. You're kind of doing that for the AI with your process. So you're not defending a point of view to a judge. Instead, you're explaining your process to the AI. Another way to think about it might be trying to explain to maybe an intern, someone who has not had any chance to practice law at all before. Maybe it's like your high schooler or some friend's kid or whoever the person might be, but you're trying to show them how you go about doing your job. You have to do each of those pieces for the AI, which sounds super annoying. And you're almost like, why do I need the AI? But the reality is the repeatability of the use that you give to the AI is the superpower. So you don't have to go and do it over and over again. You do it one time, then you always have a perfect repetition of how you do your process for given matters. Okay. So right here, it just sort of built out that table, like I mentioned. Next, we're going to do some rules. Okay, so the rules that we're going to be passing into Claude are going to be about what to think about. So one is like the various things that you might look for on a piece of paper. So that was the initial sort of framing setup. Now we're going to say, here are some issues that you might run into with a cap table, and keep an eye out for those kinds of things. So basically things that you might naturally look for if you practice in this area of law. You look at the document and it sort of pops out at you after a certain amount of time practicing. You're not really thinking about all of those things that you're doing, but you are doing lots of things. You're not just reviewing a cap table. You are thinking through all of the various lanes and avenues in which things have gone wrong for your clients in the past. Little tricks of the trade to accomplish a stated goal of a client. You might look for common misunderstandings and things of that nature. All of those individual pieces are things that you need to share with your AI. So that is what I'm sharing next, is basically here's the things to always look out for. Here's some priorities you might think about. So the first one, again, just to sort of rehash if you're feeling a little bit lost. First, you're framing what you're even talking about. So a cap table, you might be talking about a variety of various issues related to founders and investment and things like that, but it works the same for just about any sort of project. So I don't know, perhaps you're doing a real estate deal for your own home, right? So that's something that I don't practice regularly, so forgive me for butchering it, but basically you would go through and you define what you're thinking about while you're looking at your closing documents, for example. Like, do these things match the expectations set verbally with the agent? Do I see anything in here that might trap me into something that I wasn't expecting to be trapped into? And I might flag what those things look like generally for the AI. The second step is then, what are some of the things that we commonly see going wrong? So perhaps it's something about the state of the property when you move in. Maybe something about those documents does not match what you're expecting, which from what I understand in my past is common enough, right, as an issue. So that would be sort of another example of what you're providing to this AI. Next, we're going to give it some messy data. So I'm going to give it an example cap table. Oops, that's not the right one. 1 second. All right. We're going to give it a messy cap table with just some dummy data. And it's going to go ahead and build that out. And then basically we're going to add another fact pattern. So it's a bad cap table, and we're going to add some wrinkle to the situation. And then we're going to have the AI go back and test over it. So this one is not something that you need to do to build the agent. This is just for our test case. But what you would be doing in your situation would be taking an actual client file, or perhaps a redacted one if you're not quite there yet in terms of your confidence in being able to use AI. But then you'd run it through, and that would be your test. I'm just creating the test on the fly because it's simpler that way, and I am that confident in my AI. Okay. Now we're going to do a list of fixes for the AI to do. So first, it's made a bunch of analysis on the test file and the new flags, the new issues. And now we're going to create a file that explains all the fixes that need to happen and what those fixes might look like. Okay, and so while that's running, I'll just walk you through a little bit of this. So what happens on the back end when we create an agent like this is essentially you're taking a set of these instructions that you're ideating, right? You're thinking about, okay, how do I go about doing my job? You're breaking those pieces out for the AI and telling it, these are the discrete steps that you need to take. The agent piece, and I think agent is a bit of a misnomer, so don't get too wrapped up in the word. But the agent piece is the AI creating individual conversations about each of those steps. So rather than the AI taking that whole big set of content and dealing with it all in one spot, it's instead spitting out a whole new conversation that's completely fresh with that one particular task. And the reason that you want to do that is to try and sort of break out the context, because again, AI is a pattern matcher. If you have too much content within the pattern that does not match what you're looking to solve for, it's noise, and that noise can derail some of your generations. And so the benefit of these agents and these sub chats is basically the fresh context where it creates the agent on its own. You don't have to go and do this all by yourself. It then brings back all of those sub agents contents and then synthesizes it into a robust answer. So now we have our output, and our final thing is we're going to say, let's turn this whole process into a skill. For each step in the skill, create a sub agent for conducting that step. The final step is consolidating the findings into a coherent and complete response. So now it's basically confirming that there is a skill and that there is an agent in place. Right now it's doing research on how to do this. So Claude Code can pull this information. If you're using Claude Desktop, you can create skills in Desktop. So if this is a little bit too much for you, if you're like, I don't want to mess with the terminal, go use Claude Desktop, and there is a set of skills already baked into it on making skills. So you can ask Claude Desktop about how to interact with the skills, how to create new ones. A good starting point, if you have written documentation on how you do things for your team, you can submit that to Claude and say, hey, I want to take this workplace policy or this practice process template and turn it into a skill, and it will do that for you. It's pretty good at that. I have not run into significant issues. You can go in and you can edit it line by line if you wish. For the most part, it hits pretty well. So you don't need to mess around with that until you're at a point where you're like, hey, I'm like 95% of the way there. Why don't I get to that 99 so I have pretty deliverable work product after an automatic generation? But until that point, you can go ahead and just run with the skills. So it's building right now. And when it's done, I'm going to ask it to spit out what the skills and the agents files look like, and I'll share those with you. So we can connect what we've been talking about to what the AI is actually doing on the back end. You know what? I think that one of the problems that we've had in the bar is we sort of hand wave the tech, and I know it's scary to talk about tech, but you need to know it. We are at a point where if you don't know it, you're falling behind. You're unable to use tools like this because you're not willing to sort of crack it open a little. And I'm not saying that you have to go understand how to be a programmer or anything like that, but what you do need to understand is at a very basic level, like what is going on. And this is something that probably should have begun 25 years ago, sort of around the .com era. That time period is when we started running into all of the ethics issues that we're talking about in AI. Those issues existed all that time ago, and we just never really talked about it in depth. And so here we are, we're kind of having the same conversation again, where there's not really a significant difference between AI and other legal tech tools in terms of rules of professional conduct, but those are the top concerns people have when using AI. And I think that is a direct result of refusing to sort of crack things open. So as intimidating as it is, I sort of insist that you need to look at these things. You need to familiarize yourself in the same way, like when you do red lines in your internships and in your clerkships and whatnot. The repetition is what gives you some of that knowledge that you can then rely on. Just trust that the repetition here will give you some of that knowledge you can rely on. Some of the people that I know who are the most advanced in terms of legal tech are not folks who come from a tech background. Like, we are few and far between, and I think we've sort of peaked in terms of numbers, but a lot of the folks who are at that forefront are not technical folks at all. They've just done the work, they've sat with it, they sit with the AI, they ask it to explain, they look under the hood, and over time they start to understand. And so just trust that you are a smart person and you'll be able to figure this out, and you will. Okay. So we have a few things starting to be built. Let me pull them up. So don't worry about where I'm pulling them from. You can always ask the agent. I'm only pulling it up so that way we don't have to wait for the whole thing to finish generating. So here's the skill. The skill is run a full cap table red flag analysis with prioritized remediation. Accept a file to the cap table data or uses test data file if no argument given. Orchestrates 4 subagents in sequence. Validate, analyze, remediate, consolidate. So that's like pretty much what we talked about, right? Like it runs through your process one at a time. It's pretty much just a prompt, right? It's just a prompt, except that every time you have a regular chat with your AI that flags this kind of content, it will automatically run this prompt on what you're doing. And there's something to it beyond just injecting a prompt. If you just put this prompt in every time, it will do okay, but it won't do as well as it does as a skill. And that's because of something that AI providers do, which is referred to as weighting the prompt. So a regular user prompt has a certain level of weight. It's a higher weight than the content that the AI pulls from, say, the internet, right? That's why it will say, oh, you're absolutely right all the time, because your content is fed to the AI as stronger than other kinds of content. A stronger version of content than that is something called a system prompt, sometimes referred to as a developer prompt. And all of the AI providers have one. It's something that looks kind of like this, except it's purpose-built to be a chatbot. And that outweighs everything. So that's why when you ask it to do something crazy or illegal, it'll say, no, sorry, I can't do that. It's because that prompt is weighted heavier than anything you might say. You can sort of get around it if you work really hard at it, but you have to work hard at it because of how the prompt is weighted. And in between user prompt and system prompt, I believe right in between is the skill. So the skill has a heavier weight than a regular prompt, but less of a weight than a system prompt. And that's just to make sure that it tethers down to what you want it to do, as opposed to what the context might otherwise indicate for it to do. If you're, for example, if your like data set matches too perfectly with a bad output somewhere out there on the internet, you'd rather have it follow this process that you've defined for it than match that pattern that exists elsewhere. So yeah, you'll see in this first step, step 1, validate. It runs a sub agent. We'll go look at the sub agents in a second. So agent prompts must include this. So basically when it creates that sub agent, which is that additional chat conversation, it's explaining to it what the prompt should be such that the agent pulls back the information that you want. And then it does that for each of these. For the final output, it says present the consolidated report directly to the user. It explains what to do if there's a failure state. And this was all pretty much auto-generated. I can share my prompts with you, but really they were just example prompts. They're not anything special. You can run through this process with your own stuff and it will work just as well, I promise. Now let's go look at one of the agents here. Let's do the validator because that was the first one. Again, it's another prompt, and this one functions, I believe, and I need to double check this, but it behaves kind of like a system prompt for that sub chat. So when that sub chat is started by the main agent, this is the system prompt for the sub chat, and then what we saw in skills is the user prompt that the AI will use. So you can think of it almost like an org chart. There's you talking to your AI, and then beneath the AI is a few more AIs. And when you're talking to your AI, you have a system prompt and then whatever you're talking about. The AI has the sub AIs and it has the same structure. So it has the system prompt and then whatever it wants to talk about. It's the same thing. So it just goes down another layer, and that's like as complex as it gets. It's just these words get thrown around and people's eyes glaze over and they're like, what? I am not a tech guy. Why do I need to know this? You need to know it a little bit. But yeah, so this is the system prompt for that skill process. So for that first chat, this is what the system prompt would be. And it's just talking about what the categories of content might look like, what it should expect to see, what are some of the things that might be a problem you should keep an eye out for, things like that. And it really is as simple as that. And I know some of you are like, why did he say it's as simple as that? Because it is actually simple. Like, try not to get overwhelmed with like the jargon and the hype and like trying to wrap your head too much around like why it works the way it does. But just sort of walk through and like take those steps. Like you're Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade and he's stepping out onto that canyon ledge and it looks like there's nothing there. But I promise there's something there that you will land on. And the more steps you take, the more obvious it is how these things work. So that is an agent. Let's see if this is anywhere near done. During testing, it did not take this long, so I'm not sure what's going on here. But yeah, it should not be still running like this. I'm not sure what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and stop it. But that is a valid agent. That agent will run in a future session. So I could, if I had planned for this, bring in another set of data and ask it to run the skill for a cap table, and it would go through and it would look for all those problems like floating safe notes without caps associated with it, or missing vesting schedules, or non 83B elections, and things that like might be a problematic thing within that document, and it'll float it in keeping with my process. And that's like another important thing about AI is a lot of folks ask, what should I do with AI? And the real question is, what do you do already? How can you make AI do that? And a way to sort of land that point is you've probably seen in your own practice attorneys do everything kind of in their own way. And it's not that one way is bad and another is good in a lot of cases. It's just a different approach to solving the same problem. And if you try and take someone else's approach to solving your problem, it's just that much more work for you. You already know how to be a lawyer. All you need to do is learn how to be a lawyer that teaches the AI to think like you do. So with that, that'll be it. I'll see you guys next